and welcome again to Sharon Talks Art. I hope you enjoy this episode. I've got a little bit of something of everything for you again. Today's story, well, I want to talk to you about the very beginning of it all. When I was a very small child, my dad used to take me out during some holidays. I know now as an adult that it was probably my mum's way of having a day of peace and quiet at home on her own, but Dad and I used to trot up to London, get on the tube and invariably go to exhibitions, go to art galleries or go to the museums, and he knew his way around London. He worked up there. He was the one who introduced me to the art galleries, and I remember going in to look at the Pre-Raphaelites. And I think it just did it for me from the very earliest age. And I fell in love with all this romantic, beautiful, bright explosions of colour. And the stories that I would later on study in English when I was at school and at college all came together again to reinforce that. And it was really the Pre-Raphaelites that did it. I just fell in love. End of story. The Pre-Raphaelites were formed in 1848, and originally there were 7 of them, but the names that we remember in the main tend to be Dante Gabriel Rossetti, John Everett Millais, and who was the other one? William Holman Hunt. They're the 3 that really stick in my head. They're the 3 whose art I really, truly and utterly revere, and they went through a huge area, a huge time of being terribly popular. Later on in their lives, that all died down and another wave of new art took over, but during their reign they were very, very popular, and their angel, or the man who used to really support them, was Ruskin, John Ruskin. And he has got the most amazing place up in Cumbria. So if you're up there, you ever go up there on holiday, do go and have a look at his place up there. It's well worth a trip. But I want to talk to you about another trip that I took. Some years ago, my friends and I, Paula and I, trotted off up to London and we went to visit Highgate Cemetery. I'd heard of its fame and that drew me, but when we got there, it was mind-blowing. It is so worth a visit. It is worth going up to London for the day, on a nice day, to go and visit Highgate Cemetery. Nothing morbid or miserable about it, truly. Beautiful, beautiful place. And the gorgeous, gorgeous sculptures and artwork that are there. That's why I went, really. And of course, in such a gorgeous setting. Well, Paula and I meandered around and about, and there are 2 cemeteries. One of them you have to book so that you can go in and have a guided tour, and we did that. And oh my goodness, we went and found Lizzie Siddal. Now, Lizzie Siddal was wife of Rossetti, and she was the lady that you see in all the gorgeous paintings like this one here. She had the most amazing, incredible, long, wavy, Titian red hair. Absolutely gorgeous. And, you know, I think Rossetti always said that he'd fallen in love with her hair as much as anything else, because he painted it and he painted it and he painted it. Gorgeous pictures. And we'll see her, you see her in Ophelia, and the story behind this, you know, Hamlet's Ophelia who drowned in the river, and apparently he had her lying in a bath so that he could paint her in the water as she was lying back in the water. And to keep the bath water warm, he'd lit candles underneath this iron bath. But of course the water went cold and the poor girl landed up with pneumonia and was terribly, terribly poorly. They thought they were losing her. She was really that unwell. Well, God bless her, Lizzie Siddal is buried in Highgate Cemetery, in the part of the cemetery that you have to visit with a guide. And it is so overgrown and dilapidated, it is just abandoned. The whole place is an amazing tanglement of trees and vines and ivy and stones It's incredible. We went and found her. And there's the most incredible story. Here we get to it. Apparently, she was buried there, and because he loved her so much, he buried her with a book of poems that he had written. And they went in the coffin with her, and he was mourning for years. However, at the end, I think it was about 2 years, he decided that he'd had enough of mourning, and actually he quite liked his book of poems and he wanted them back. So off he trotted with some friends to the graveyard to go and dig up the coffin. Now, in these days, Victorian times, grave robbing was illegal. You could not break in and rob the graves for goods, grave goods, jewellery, etc. But digging people up wasn't, because in that era, believe it or not, if a better graveyard was built down the road, you were quite entitled to dig your relative up and to take them and go and put them somewhere else. But you were only allowed to do that after midnight by the light of a bonfire, believe it or not. That was the law. However, he trundled along and he dug her up and he opened the coffin, and the story goes that the book of poems had just fallen apart and crumpled to dust and was mouldy, but her hair had continued to grow after death and it filled the coffin. How about that? Can you imagine it? White pens. I wanted to talk to you about white pens. They are the bane of my life as an artist, because we like to use them for highlights, don't we? And that's really very, very good and very cool, and it works. But does it? In the past, I have probably been through so many different makes and types and brands and breeds, and it just drives me to drink, because you buy your pen, you use it once and it's perfectly fine, and then I'll come back to it in a month, 2 months, 6 months time, and they never, ever, ever work. I have just thrown 3 out, and I'm just getting very, very bad tempered about the whole thing. I decided that I would go out and have a spend up, and I have bought a bevvy of white pens. And today you and I are going to test drive them. We're going to have a look at them each in turn, see what they do, how they work, whether they work, and how well they work. So come with me and let's have a look and see what we can get up to, shall we? Here are the pens in question. All sorts, truly. I asked for something of everything, an example of all the different types, and we've got Poscas and we have uni pens here, and I've got a jelly roll. These are quite interesting. I haven't come across these before. These are Pintor, and then Faber-Castell. We all know Faber-Castell for their drawing pens, their black pens, but how about the white ones? What do they do? Do they work? And we have all sorts here, from fibre tips to brush pens and jelly rolls. And I just want to see how they all work and how they compare. And the very first thing that I thought that I would do was to look at them like this. And I have gone into the work with the idea of seeing whether they are bright and light and whether they show up, and would I be prepared to use them. And from very first look, you can see that this one just screams, doesn't it? It says, I'm white, and this is what we're looking at. We can see the Pilot Pintor, this one Fine, is lovely too. I like that very much. And up here we have the Sakura Jelly Roll, And again, that's a good pen. Now, a couple of people I've spoken to all say that this one is probably their favourite. It lasts a long time and it gives you a good white with a fine point. We need to be thinking about all of those things. So although the brush is nice to be able to use, does it give us the density that we're looking for? This is quite faded, isn't it? This, you know, it's not quite as white as it could be. And this one here, so it's worth thinking about. They're all different. I mean, Indian ink, waterproof, light fast, acid free, all of these, fabulous. In the main, you need to store most of them flat because you'll find that you have a nib that needs to be kept moist and the ink needs to be in there. Although some of them do have, see, ball bearing, shape the colour up. So that's really cool, that's good. Some of them are water-based, so the Poscas are really, really quite useful. Poscas, they are a water-based colour that you can use for all sorts of applications. Really, really, really good pens. I believe you can use Poscas and you can cook them on pottery and glass and they will stay. Be careful with dishwashers, but just bear that in mind. You could, if you wanted to do a special glass or a special mug or plate for an occasion, this would be the pen that you'd go to. They're very good. They're a kind of acrylic base. These can be stored in any position because once again they do have the ball bearing in them, so that's worth knowing. Now, what we want to really know is whether we can do all sorts of things that we want to do with them as artists. So we've seen what they do on black, and that's fine. On flat paper, that's good. But what happens when you're looking at something like this? Will this work on watercolour? Because very often I find that when I come into watercolour and I try to add white pens, the pens get cluttered up, the nibs get clagged up, and suddenly you find that they won't work, and that's a real issue. So the jelly roll that we liked so much, here it is. I'm using a picture that I know I won't go into and work in future, so I just want to come in here and start using the pen to see if it will work. Oh yes, you see, that's just gorgeous. Let me pull you in so that you can see it. So up here, across here, and if I come in, now that really works. And doesn't that show up? That really shows up. There we are. So yes, very happy with that. That works, and it seems to stay white. It dries very quickly, which is nice, and it's almost as white as the paper, so I'm happy with that. And to the best of my knowledge, that's the ball pen, and it hasn't cluttered up the ball. So that's all right, so we're happy with that one. Let's have a look at something like this. These are the Pintors. And as I say, this is a fairly new one to me. I don't know this pen particularly, so it's quite nice to get hold of something different and have a go. It's Pilot. It's the maker's Pilot. I'm going to just work up here so that you can see what I'm doing. Yeah, you see, good and white. Colour comes off a little bit on there, but not a lot. Yeah, it is moving the blue if I wanted to scrub into it, but you know, it's a good white colour, isn't it? So I think you could get some good highlights from that if you were thinking about using that for highlights on top of a watercolour, so that would be really quite good. Quite happy with that, that's quite nice. These you do need to store flat. Even although they've got the ball bearing in them, it does tell you to store them flat. So that's well worth thinking about. They come in different thicknesses, so that is the F, that's fine, 1 millimetre, and this one's even finer, and actually this one looks whiter. So that's quite interesting, isn't it? Okay, so that would be lovely. for highlights, trees, little bits of branches, so that would work very well. I wanted to show you the Posca, these lovely big Poscas, because the white on these is quite fantastic. Look at that. Absolutely lovely. Like them very, very much. Now these are water-based, so that means that you can come into that with a brush. Let's pop some down whilst it's wet. And you can come in with a brush, damp brush, water, and you can move that. So that gives you extra choices, doesn't it? That means that you can put a highlight down and then you can come in and you can blend it. So that for me would work really nicely on clothing. I like that technique when I'm painting on clothes. Put it on, blend it, and then you go. Can you go into it afterwards and move it? Little bit. I'm moving the colour underneath more than anything, but so you can move that afterwards, so that's quite interesting. Okay, so they could be useful, couldn't they? And then we've got these lovely little Faber-Castell pencils here. Incidentally, if you find that your Posca tips dry out here, you can pull them out and you can soak them in water and it will rejuvenate them. So that's well worth knowing too, isn't it? That's a good one to know. Now here we go. These are the Faber-Castell, and that's a beautiful, I love these kind of brush point pens. They've got a brush shape and a soft nib. Look at that. Can you imagine that for white hair? Oh, and of course I can work as fine with it as well. So that gives me lots and lots of options. Not as white as the Posca, however. So maybe you might have to go over that a couple of times if you really wanted to give it some welly. But for the finesse of that, that's quite beautiful. That would work nicely on a black paper, wouldn't it, I think. So that's the Faber-Castell, and that comes in several different, look at this, you've got this chisel tip. So that's fun. So if you wanted to write, that would give you options, so that's rather fun. And this one, this is the 1.5, so this is a bullet tip. Whiter, you see, that's whiter than the brush. So, have to think about that if you're working it. So that is whiter than using the brush. Okay, see how that compares like that. All right, stays whiter. Okay, we'll think about that one. This is novel. How about that? That's a brush. Really rather cool. And with this one, if we take this off the end here, you will express colour to the nib purely and simply by depressing the top. And it gives you the fluid and the paint that you need. And again, this is the Posca pen, so this one will be, you can use with water. All right, lovely, lovely thing. Look at that. This one, exclamation, and it's got a lovely, lovely, clever cap here with an inner cap so that when you close it, that has a spring and it closes it tight and keeps it safe. That stops you from inadvertently in a drawer pressing the top, and you must keep that one flat. Specifically, that one has to be stored flat. Let's have a look at the Unipaint markers. And these are quite interesting. We have an extra fine and a bullet tip here, and they are oil based and they will write on anything. So if you've got plugs, and I use these for marking my black plant labels in the greenhouse, and they stay. They're good. I don't find they fade, and so from that point of view, very, very pleased with these outside. They've got the ball bearing in them, and I'm going to have a little look at this. And this is, so we get this to work. And now you see, look, that would worry me. So that's the, right, okay, I've used this once. So let's give its nose a wipe. and we give it a good shake. I can smell that. Now you see we've actually got some kind of thinners going on here, so I can smell it. Now you see I'm not happy with that. I'd reject that straight away. So that's the Unipaint marker and that's the bullet tip. And I don't like the way that's behaving at all. If that was you, you'd need to make sure that you tried that out first. I'd keep it clean before you put it away in case it clagged up the tip, and give it a good shake. So this is shake number 3, isn't it? So it's not bad coverage, but it is bleeding into the paper, so I certainly wouldn't use this on watercolours. Absolutely wouldn't use it on watercolours. And it's shattering. Let me bring you even closer so that you would be able to see that. So it's shattering into the paper. And if you use that on a watercolour, I don't think you'd be quite happy with that. So this is not what you would be wanting to use this for. This is a marker pen for marking products that you might want to have in a domestic situation around the house. I don't think I would be ever thinking about using that for artwork. Alright, so that's a lesson learned. Let's see how we go with the small one. I want to give this a good shake, having learnt my lesson with that. Beautiful tip again, gorgeous tip. Now you see that's a different story. That one's nice. I think I'm still getting some of the shattering on the watercolour. Let me bring you in close so that you can judge for yourself. But having said that, I don't think it's as bad as the large one. And it's white when you use it in small quantities like this. But as I say, I know for a fact that that little pen will work for you on things like glass and ceramics. So if you are a crafter as opposed to a painter, this will do you very, very well. And it is permanent, I know that, and it will write on anything. It's horses for courses, isn't it? It's what you would do with it and how you would use them. And we can see from this that some are definitely whiter than others. Some are perfect. They just stay where you put them. They just stay there and don't budge. Gosh, they really are smelly. I'm sitting here, I don't mind the smell, but if you do, if you were worried about that, I would be a bit concerned about those. All right? Well, having had a fiddle and a play with the pens and tried them out and seen which one's what and what I like and what they look like, I've been through this here and I see that realistically the finest pen I have with a nice white colour to it and with a good thin nib is going to be something like the Jelly Roll. And I thought that it was time probably to put it to a practical use, and I've just finished this painting. This is a long tall canvas. It's a canvas on a wooden frame painted in acrylic, and I've used texture medium here to come through and to put the tree in. And I rather felt that I would like to add some extra white branches up here to make it finer, to make the work more fine. And I've tried it down here, this pen, and I've managed to get whiskers in on my pussycat. So that's gratifying, so I know that that can work. But what I want to do now is come up here and have a go at the branches. So let's see if we can do that here and how it works for us. I know that it does because I have had a fiddle here initially. Let's just work into this a little bit like this. And I'm finding that this runs quite nicely on a canvas, which is unusual, let's face it. you'd expect it to wibble and wobble and bump up and down the warp and the weft, but it's not doing that, so that's good. And it's sitting nicely. It isn't sort of, sometimes they pool and they puddle because, you know, it's onto acrylic, and acrylic is a plastic when all is said and done. But this is working quite well here. I'm quite happy with that. See, that'll even go over the glue. That's I've put some of the stars in with one of the little pots of glue. So I'm quite, you know, glitter glue, quite happy with that, the way that's worked. So we're just keeping it loose and free and coming in from the gold. What I've used with the gold is a fabric pen. I've used something that normally would be used on fabric, but that's worked well. It's gone down well and it's laid colour down properly, so I'm happy with that. So it's working well. For our demonstration today, I thought that we'd use these pens and see what we could actually do with them and how useful they would be to paint with. And therefore I'm going to use one of my plates, and I want to use the jelly roll to start with, to come around here to give myself an outline, because we're going to paint the moon. I just want to make sure I don't have any of that on the plate, because that could give me grief if it's all permanent and it stays. I'm in trouble, aren't I? And now I want to come in and I'm going to wiggle woggle my line like this, as though it's cratered and chipped, and I've given myself a moon shape. And then, knowing full well that some of these pens I can use with water, and that's the Poscas, let's come into this nice big white pen here and let's see how it works. So I've got no idea, you and I are playing together. Oh, yeah, not bad, look at that. Okay, so I'm going to just move that around. I want that kind of thin white to start with. Let's have some down here. Oh, I think that's going to be fun to bleed. Wait a minute, we'll do some of that in a second. Let's run that down and round. Don't worry about going over the edges, because if you do, you can just turn that into a crater. Coming up through there. Like here. And then I'm coming into it wet. Ooh, look at that. That's nice, isn't it? So if we just come in there with a bit of water and urge that to bleed a little bit more, that works for me. So now it's drying, so now my lines are quite hard. That's okay. Just learn to work with what we've got, it's fine. Like that. Cracks and all sorts of things going on here. Like it a bit whiter in this area. So put the colour in, and then we're going to get hold of it with the brush and move it. Now these are fun, aren't they? You've got to admit these are fun. I like all that. There we are. A bit whiter up here. A bit more. Wibble wobble that edge a little bit more so it's not quite so hard. I'm going to make the edge of that crater even more obvious, like that. Well, these are fun, aren't they? I'm using a sable brush, so I'm just going to be very careful about keeping it clean. I don't want to land up with any issues with that. I don't want it to dry on the brush and give me grief. This is the brush pen. What happens if I, oh yes, look. So if you wanted to be softer on your paper, I noticed that using the hard felt bullet tip on the other pen has marked the paper, but that's alright, it gives me creases and marks. But this is softer, it's kinder. So we can go into that. And that would give us seriously good coverage. Look at that. That's nice. I like that. So that is really quite good, isn't it? Soften up wherever you need to. That's the joy of these Poscas. I want to sharpen that up, make that all a bit whiter up there. Pull that out to a tip like this as though it's sharp. That's it. And then I want to come in, this is the little jelly roll, and I want to see if I can use that for cracks. Yes, I can. That's working quite well. Doesn't work so well on the damp paper, so we won't do that. We'll only use it where we've got drier paper. Alright, so that's good. That works. I like that. So that gives us creases and cracks on our moon. Again, we can use that just to give a hint of little craters like that. If you come out around the edge like that and give yourself that hooky bit and then join it up, that will look like a crater on the outside of the moon. Okay, could do one there, look. There. Fabulous, I'm happy with that, I'm really pleased with that. The next thing I want to do is imagine that our moon is not lit by the sun. What would happen if we came up here and the moon was actually lit by candles? So I'm going to do a little bit of that. Put some of the wax that's fallen there like this. A small little stub of a candle here. Alright, and then maybe, because 3 is good, isn't it? So 3 is a good number, so we're going to have a third candle there, and wick, wick, and a wick, and we're going to have some drips here, and imagine that that's dripped through as well there. Like that, and then we colour them, and we've got to decide how we're going to do that. I'm going to go back to the Poscas because I know that I can get these to move with water, so I want to come in there, and I'm doing something here that's that you may think is unusual, but I'm coming in and I'm putting the shadow in with the white. A little bit of shadow in there. This is kind of reverse thinking now. I'm coming in, putting the shadow in with the white. Do it a bit at a time because I'm not convinced yet that I know how quickly these will dry. That's the point. I'm going to imagine that we've got some drips in there. And then where they've dripped down here, I want to put white on the tips here. And I'm going to bleed that up, blend it up like this, just using this blunt little brush here. Just want to give the impression. Yeah, you see that dried quite quickly, so that's worth knowing. That's all right. It's good to know it. And where this drip comes over the other drips, again, I want to put shadow underneath it, like this. And I want to come into my candles, and we're going to do the lovely flame. And I think the best way to do that, to be honest with you, is to choose one of the finer brushes. So what have we got here? We've got this lovely, this is that. So I'm going to come in, do that. You see, I don't think that that is white enough to get the heart of the flame that would be hot. So although you've got this beautiful sweep with that, I just love the feeling of that. Let's see what else we've got here that we can use. So that's, oh yes, look. That gives me the heat in the middle of the flame. And then I want to get the idea of this kind of glowing aura around them. And for that, we're going back to the pen. And I've got choices here. I think what I might do, let's try something different, you and I, and see how we go with it. I want to take a brush full of water, and not up to the, right up to the candle, but I'm coming out here and adding water up through like that. And then when I add this, let it do its own thing. Pull it a little bit. And we'll let that dry and we'll see what it does. It'll give us that tinge, that glow of light around the candle. Let's do this one as well. So drop it in and just let it bleed into the water. And it'd be interesting to see if that how that fades out, because as we all know, watercolour is really quite difficult from the point of view that if you put gouache in to do this kind of job, it fades out so much, it's really irritating. Sometimes you have to go back in and rework it and do it again, and I get quite irritated by that. I just want to come up through there, soften all of that. And let me just put the lid on that, because I think it would be stupid not to. And then you get these kind of smoky fumes coming off a candle, don't you? And I'm just using the side of this now for that, because I don't want it to be a perfect, beautiful line. I just want it to be a dot, dot, dash kind of spider's web of a line up through here, like that. And I think the only other thing that I would do in there to really, really recreate the heat that's coming from that candle is I would just want to find myself a red pen, and I'm going to put a little bit of red into this middle when it's dried. I found a nice red marker pen. This is a style file marker. These are permanent markers and they're alcohol based, and if I come in there and I just give that centre of the flame a little bit of heat up through here, it just makes them look a little bit more interesting. Good pens. I'm quite interested in them, and I think that they give you a good effect, and this is what we're looking for, isn't it? As watercolourists, we want something that really, really stands out. And you can see here that having done this with the jelly roll, it's just fabulous. It doesn't fade, it stands out, and this is perfect. Well, here we are in a different room of the house, just for a little while. I wanted to show you something slightly different. This was my big project during lockdown. I needed something to take my mind off it, and this had been sitting here waiting for a remake for quite a while. This is what it looked like. Well, I decided that I was fed up with that. That was an original design from a Lawrence Llewellyn-Bowen programme on TV, a makeover programme. And so I can't say that that particular idea had been mine in the first instance. And I just loved the idea of the pink and soft clouds and the nighttime falling. But times were moving on and I wanted something a little bit different. And I kept the arches. The arches are still there. I bought new paint and I feathered it into the arches all along the edges. That was fun. That was a difficult job actually. It took a long time. And then used white emulsion to white out the insides of the arches so that I could start again. Now you probably know, I'm sure you do, you've heard me talk about it before, but a couple of my real heroes art-wise, Rodney Matthews and another chap called Roger Dean, and both of them back in the 1970s and still today actually created lots of vinyl album cover art and book covers, and it was all fantastic, surreal planets and worlds, and oh, I just loved it and I wanted to be there. And this is why I've gone to town with the wall and I've used their ideas. So once again, I've used their paintings as a springboard for my own. Now, Roger Dean was well known for his floating islands. He kind of got there first before they did on Avatar, and I believe that that caused quite a bit of grief law-wise when Avatar came out, but that's another story. And I wanted this idea, I love this idea of being in the middle of nowhere and nobody can get to you. I have tempered it somewhat this time because we have bridges from island to island and down here to the mainland again. And I've dropped waterfalls, falls of water from the islands. But would you like a closer look? Okay then, I'll bring you over. Let's come in closer then and we can have a little look, see what's going on here. Let me start off over on this side and we'll work our way through. Over here we've got a tree. Obviously you think to yourself, I've put little orange fruits in it. You know me, I love the colour orange, so any excuse to do something like that. And sitting in the tree further down here we have socks. There's our sock sitting there looking out at the world, and down below him we have Syrah. Syrah sitting out looking over the bridge, seeing what's happening in the world. So there we have the bridge. And that's kind of encrusted with vines and bits of greenery. I love that look, that overgrown Sleeping Beauty kind of idea. That appeals to me very much. In the middle panel, right down the bottom here, so small that you can only just see her, that's our cobwebs, our little cat. We lost her just before Christmas last year, sadly, but she's there, she's immortalised. Up here on the pillar, that's a cobweb, as you can so readily see, and that's me just thumbing my nose at a bit of housework. Don't like that, don't want to do that, so we just make sure we've got a bit of a cobweb. Moon up in the sky, love the idea of planets and what have you. And then we come down to the floating islands, and to make them look very, very large, I've put a city on them. Now they just don't involve an awful lot of brushwork. When you get up close, there's not a lot of detail there, but there's enough when we stand back to give us the impression that that is a city and it's on the floating island. And the other side of the island, something Roger Dean did a lot, was waterfalls just flowing into nothingness. And the other island, there's a small one here attached. This is much the same. We've got the waterfall on that one too, but no habitation. I just wanted that to be on the big one. And if we move over into arch number 3, this is the one I had the great fun with. We have buzzards flying around here where I live, and every time we see them we go running out to go and watch and try and take a photograph. So I wanted to have 2 buzzards up in the sky, but recently we also now have the kites, the red kites. So down here I've introduced 2 red kites. We've got our bird life, like all that. And then for me, down here we have the land coming up from the base of this cliff, and it comes up, 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 trees clinging on for dear life, look, and a little bit of greenery again, and we come up and lo and behold we've got habitation. Here it is, 2 funny little huts, and again this is very Rodney Matthews. Love his little dwellings, so thank you Rodney. I've cribbed the idea, I just love it. The thoughts of living there and looking out over this vista and seeing the birds flying in the sky being on a level with me just appeals no end. Love it. Love it. So let me see if I can get back far enough, because this is the great difficulty in this room, is trying to be far enough behind it all so that you can see it. So not really, I'm afraid. There's the camera sitting there where we filmed before, and down here this is the management. Here he is sitting there watching it all happening. This is our Sirrah sitting there managing the whole thing. He's very good at it. He's very laid back, is Sirrah, very laid back. So that's my mural. I'll show you what I used to create it. Come next door into the studio and we'll have a little look and see what I've used. When I decided to paint my mural, I wanted to keep things as simple as I possibly could and as inexpensive as possible. And the best solution, without a shadow of a doubt, was to go and buy small pots of colour, tester colours. And I didn't go and have them made up and mixed up for myself. I decided that I was going to go and find the colours that were available. The first time I did it, I had the colours made for me, and they were about between £5 and £7 a pot. And I didn't use as much as I expected. This was an easier option. These came from B&H, I think. They're nowhere special. They were £1 a pot, 90 something pence a pot. Big difference, isn't it? And you can see that I really haven't used an awful lot. I've still got plenty left in there for further projects. And I used 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14, 16 colours. I had the choices. I can mix them, you can thin them. You know, you just work with it. You can, that one's not even been used. Look, I found that even if I wanted to, I could mix acrylic into them. I didn't use these brushes at all. I used my own brushes. These are just too hefty and leave too many brush marks. I just used normal brushes, just a nylon brush. Didn't go for the sables on this one. And as I say, I've got lots and lots left. The point is that it's easy to use these. They look like the paint that you use on the wall, and the opacity of them, and well, by that I mean the covering power of them, is second to none. Let me show you here on a piece of paper. If I take this and use one of these colours, let's use something that you will see well. And if I use one of these colours and I paint with it, it'll cover it's just, the coverage is amazing. So good. and that means that whatever colour I've got on the wall behind me, I know that it's going to be good coverage. Now the other point about using these is they've got a matte finish, and again it looks like the rest of the wall, and that's quite important. If you use acrylic, when you stand sideways to acrylic, it shines, and I didn't want any kind of glimmer on the wall at all. I did that last time I painted, and I found that when I was walking into it and it was against the light, the paint just shone on the wall, and I didn't want that this time. And for the finer detail, that was dead simple as well, because I used a uni pen, permanent pen, quite a fine one, and that did very well for the cobwebs and the bits and pieces. Let me bring you in so that you can see what I'm wittering about. So cobwebs here, they were easy to paint, and I used a Sharpie pen for any of the larger detail that I needed on the wall. And of course with a Sharpie you can have this more bullet point, or over here, excuse me reaching over here everybody, this is a really fine liner. So we've got those 3 different widths of pen, which is very, very useful. And of course once they're dry you can just go over them and they don't budge. They're permanent and they are spirit based, and that means that if I should decide to cover them or work next to them with this, it won't affect it and it won't be a problem, because these are water based. How easy could that be? So that's the mural. No difficulty at all, well worth having a go. You never know what you can achieve, do you? This is the piece of work that I had recently, and you can see the glorious skin tones that you can achieve by using very, very transparent paints. You would not be able to do this with a paint like this that is very opaque. It stands to reason. You need to have thin paint so that you can layer it. I can show you that very, very clearly. This is just a black piece of paper. And on our black piece of paper, we're going to throw a few grains of rice. And when we put rice on the paper, this will represent an opaque paint. So big, big granules of pigment, big chunks. And they settle, some sit on top of each other, which is why you get areas that are darker and some areas that are lighter and some where there isn't any colour at all. And when you push a brush through it, it pushes the pigment away and moves it about and piles some of it up. And this is why this area here will be darker. Where I push the brush through, the paint will look thinner, and you get stripy paint usually when you try to paint a nice wash or to paint this quite densely. If we add more, it just compounds the problem, so that you have lots of colour here, not so much here, and again when it's hard to move it about and you literally land up shoving it around. That's opaque paint, big chunks of pigment. When you come to something that's quite transparent, we're looking at salt. And salt, when we put that down, is much better behaved. We can spread salt around, it will move more readily, it distributes more evenly. That's the best way to describe it really. And when I shunt it about, my brush marks don't tend to be quite as huge and as noticeable. This, as we saw, when you put one lot on top of another, it will pile up and lump up. This, it nestles. So when I sprinkle this, I get quite a decent covering. And, oh, I'm cat-handed today, aren't I? And and it nestles in amongst each other. It will settle. And if you're working on paper that doesn't have such a tendency, you've really got to brush it quite a bit more to move it around. When you mix them together, the smaller grains settle down amidst the larger grains. These will just nestle down in amongst the others. So they're much better behaved, much more social, and not so inclined to leave these big lumps of stuff everywhere. And this is why you can land up with some very, very odd looking washes and coats. It's easier to put more salt on because it will spread around and move about more readily, and to layer paint than it is to try and layer lots of chunks of this. Much easier. And we can see that if we remove this and we bring this over here, and I explain how that works with paper. If you use a paper that is lumpy bumpy, and this paper really is, here we go. I've got these two patterns on here. I will explain. This paper is really, when you look at it crosswise, it really is hills and valleys. There's a texture on it. And this is what makes your paint work for you. I want to show you these are the large granules of paint, and as a consequence, when you take a colour that's really opaque, so I'm talking here about something like this is cerulean blue, and cerulean blue is quite opaque, large chunks. When you put it on, on your paper, you find that the colour sinks down into the dips like this. It's heavy. And these granules come down and sit into the dips of the paper. You might get the odd bit and piece up round here, but it will be more inclined to settle down into the dips of the paper. When we use something like this here is sap green, beautiful colour, very, very transparent. And sap green, instead of doing this, will just do this, and it will cover the paper, and it will quite happily just stay where it is because it's light enough not to slide down the hills and settle in the dips. Granulating looks like this when you see it on your artwork. And this is exactly an example of how the paint settles down into those dips.